While we were chatting offline, one of the things that I thought would be interesting to take you up on was the old story of sick notes. And, we've in BPO, we know sick notes, and we know at times these sick notes aren't all that they appear to be. So, without running the risk of making somebody who's legitimately unwell and has a legitimate sick note, how do we kind of tackle this? I mean, what are some of the interesting scenarios you faced?
Okay. Gerald, we've all been there, haven't we? You wake up sick, you're wondering whether to stay at home or call the boss and whether you'll need a doctor's note. It's a huge frustration for employers where people just nip off to the corner shop or the internet cafe and go and buy one. But one little piece of paper can cost a business thousands or protect an employee's livelihood. So today we're going to be talking sick notes, as you say, in South Africa. And the place that I normally start with all of these is the facts. And the facts are based in law. So let's go and have a look at what the Basic Conditions of Employment Act says. And sick notes are actually governed by Section 23 that deals specifically with medical certificates, that there is a medical certificate necessity if you are absent for more than 2 days. So that's 3 or more days the employer may ask for a sick certificate. And what the law says is that employers can withhold pay if an employee is absent for more than 2 consecutive days. So they can withhold pay, but it doesn't say anything about taking disciplinary action or anything like that, because it goes further to say it's also governed by the HPCSA. It's the Health Professionals Council of South Africa, where certain people only can give you a sick certificate. The law also says if you're absent on more than 2 occasions within an 8-week period and you fail to provide a medical certificate if you're asked for it, then the company can also withhold pay for those situations.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously there's what the law says, and then there's what the company chooses to apply. I mean, recently I did some consulting for a business that introduced some sort of medical plan where they had deployed telemedicine. So if you weren't feeling well, you could dial into the platform and speak with the doctor remotely and tell them how you're feeling, and the doctor would issue confirmation of the discussion and something that the company chose to accept as a medical note, which maybe I'm just too old school, but that makes no sense because I can tell you whatever I like over the phone or over a video conference. And one thing about employees in the BPR space, they're very well versed in symptoms. They speak to each other. So you as a doctor have no choice but to say, well, listen, Gerald spoke to me. He sounds hella sick. So yeah, I think you should take a couple of days off. I mean, is that sort of thing acceptable? Is it valid to accept that kind of note from a remote consultation?
The employer can choose to or not. So again, we go back to the law. Has the individual been examined by a medical practitioner? And let's go to the HPCSA, what it says, that only doctors, dentists, and psychologists who are registered with the HPCSA may give you a sick certificate. On that sick certificate, there are also certain requirements that need to be had. And that's governed by the Act, the Health Professions Act. I think that's Section 17. It must be signed. It's got to say, give the name, the date, the doctor's registered practice number, the doctor's full name and address and contact number, the date that the person was seen, then the reason for the illness and whether the doctor actually examined the patient or was informed by the patient. And those 2 things are very key because the employer has a right in law and in practice to question a doctor's certificate, which has been declared as hearsay evidence. And I don't want to get too technical around it, but all it is a piece of paper. So to answer your question, the employer can accept the telephonic doctor's request or doctor's note, or he cannot. And he can ask for more about it. Whether the employer accepts that sick certificate or not is up to them. But we have a right to question.
The pessimist in me tells you that whole process is fraught with all kinds of pitfalls, usually to the detriment of the employer. But I think it's pretty straightforward, although the
Yeah.
companies choose to apply it to different degrees. So let's assume for a second I'm a team leader or a frontline manager. I have an employee that is absent on an ongoing basis, usually on a payday or payday weekend. They have a doctor's note every time. It's always the same doctor. Coincidentally, it also happens to be the same doctor that every other absent person in the team uses. What is the way to navigate that mess?
Okay. So now you're talking about there's a suspicion of this individual abusing sick leave. And like I said, you have a right as an employer to go and query. So you can speak to the doctor or you can ask the individual to provide some evidence, some more evidence that he was there as well. It normally falls to human resources to go and check sick notes and phone whether the doctor and find out whether he was actually there. I had occasion ages ago where I sent out an HR manager to the address of the doctor, and she did a drive-by and realized that it was a farm plot, and that was it. First of all, you have a look and see on the website of HPCSA whether or not this doctor is in fact registered. And that's where a lot of the fraud is exposed. So these are the checks and balances that you can do. Abuse of sick leave is a disciplinary measure that you can take. Remember that the law doesn't talk about discipline. It just says that they must produce a sick certificate from a registered medical practitioner, or you can withhold pay. The disciplinary measures are, hey, I've noticed that you are absent on a Monday or after payday regularly. What is the problem? And then you take it from there. Something that crops up as well is traditional healers. And this is why I keep coming back to the basic conditions talks about withholding pay, not disciplinary action, because an employer doesn't have a right to tell any individual that you have to go to that doctor, or I'm querying your beliefs and why you're going to a traditional healer. They can go to anyone they wish, but the law still says it needs to be registered. The Traditional Health Practitioners Council is where traditional healers now need to be registered. So in practice, it's a little bit more difficult because they don't have an online portal where you can pop in a registration number. They're not quite there yet. In fact, it's his job to prove and verify whether the traditional healer is registered. So you ask for their registration certificate, their annual practicing certificate, if that's applicable, their registration, or you can contact what's called the Traditional Health Practitioners Council of South Africa and request confirmation. It's a very laborious process because unlike the HPCSA where you can just pop in a registration number or the doctor's name, this is governed a little bit differently. And it's a practical challenge for employers because there's no searchable public data online.
Yeah, look, the whole thing of the sick notes and absence and people justifying their absence starts becoming a bit of a cat and mouse. You see that Miranda's absent, Miranda's getting doctor's notes. I've seen cases where the doctor's legitimately registered. The doctor is physically within the address they say they are, but the rumor on the floor is if you go to this doctor's room, everybody's in on it. The nurse or the receptionist has got a pad, and you write in anything you want, and here's your slip, and $100 later you're on the way. And if the doctor gets a phone call, he'll say, "Yep, I did see Miranda." As you said, it's a time wasting issue. But let's take it to its fullest conclusion. I've had enough of Miranda's illness, legitimate or not. She's sick. This environment doesn't agree with her. It's not good for her. Let me humor you and say that your sickness is legitimate. Clearly, this place is making you sick. We now need to find you a job that might suit you better, and it's probably a job not in my business. How do I get that right?
Mm. Now you're talking about implementing an incapacity process, which is quite involved. But first off, an employer also has a right to have a conversation with the employee to see, I'm seeing repetitive behavior. I have a concern. Show the calendar of all the absences that's been happening, show the sick leave that's been exhausted, that's the annual leave that's been exhausted, and have a conversation with the individual. And that's the start of an incapacity process where you actually ask the employee to bring a doctor's report. You have the right to do that. And we're very concerned that this is going to be an ongoing thing. And it appears that you are incapable of fulfilling your role, constantly sick. We're concerned, but obviously we need to find some kind of accommodation for you. And the incapacity process, Gerald, is involved, and you need to be very careful about how you go about it. But these are the conversations you need to start having with an employee. But you can also have the conversation to say, hey, I'm starting to notice that you are not upholding your side of your contract. We're paying you and you're not giving us your labor. Let's talk about it.
It's the 20% that cast dispersion on the 80% that are legitimately ill. Man, it makes us all suspicious. But I think, Miranda, I think there are options available to employers. And the one option is, if you have such a big absence issue that people are resorting to this kind of behavior, you can't just look at it as though, well, this is a game I need to play some chess now with this employee and catch them out. I suppose the right thing to do is to try and understand why these people don't want to be at work.
Yeah.
There are people that will take chances and are just that way inclined. They take drugs and do all kinds of things on a payday and they're gone. But then there are things inside your business that drive this behavior. The one thing that I know was always the biggest driver of this was just terrible schedules, scheduled away from the ability to spend some time with their families. And eventually an employee gets to the point that says, I actually don't care what you do to me anymore. I haven't had a day as a family day. And when you do schedule it, it's one day. I'm dead tired from night shift. And so the story goes. And up to a point, you can't blame these guys. The advice I have in my experience has been look beneath your absence issue. Ask people, chat to them. Fighting fire with fire doesn't always work. You're just going to perpetuate the problem until you start addressing the cause. And sometimes the cause is things you're doing, and other times the cause is the people you hire. But at the end of the day, there's an out of control absence issue usually is a bigger story.
We've spoken before about absenteeism and toxic environments, and that's what you're talking about, not just the scheduling also, but the shifted work as well, how those are scheduled. So to have a look internally, but obviously that's a much bigger question when we're talking about toxic environments, or you've got a really, really poor line manager who does nothing to engage you, pressure, all of those things. But those are the sorts of things that one would start uncovering when you start having those conversations with the individuals. What do you do when you've got a repeat offender? These are the kind of conversations that you need to have with those individuals.
Absolutely.
There is one more thing, since we're honing in on sick notes today, G, and that is also, apart from the traditional healers, the other thing that a lot of employees do, again because of cost, is they go to clinics. So the question of clinic visits, is the admissibility of a clinic note okay for us? There are notes that get signed by a clinic nurse. Now, it's only valid, those nurses, if they have a specific legal authority to diagnose and treat patients. So the professional nurses with a post-basic diploma, those are the advanced primary healthcare nurses. They are registered with the South African Nursing Council, SANC, and they can actually give you a sick note because they have diagnosed and they are treating you, but up to 2 days, maximum 2 days only. So that can happen with a clinic. But the attendance certificates that get signed by staff nurses and general nurses, they don't have advanced qualifications. They cannot book you off sick. They can only issue an attendance certificate. And all the attendance certificate does is prove that you were at the clinic. It doesn't certify that you are unfit for work, which is a requirement when you present a sick certificate for days, according to the Basic Conditions Act, of 3 or more days or 2 days in an 8-week period. It doesn't measure up to that. So we are legally entitled as employers to treat time covered by a mere attendance certificate as unpaid leave. So those are the situations we see with sick notes.
So, look, there's some common sense things to look out for when dealing with sick notes. Then there's some nuances that I think some of the newer team leaders might not be as familiar with, and these things come with experience if they're not part of a formal leadership induction training. So I would imagine, Miranda, through your portfolio of offerings, you have tools and knowledge that you could offer to businesses to train their employees to be able to manage this sort of thing.
No, definitely. And for me, labor relations isn't always about speaking to the employer. It's also speaking to the employee practitioner. So there's all those kinds of nuances as well. And it's instructing and being proactive with the employees and letting them know what is legal and what's not legal.
Applying consistency. So if somebody wants to reach you, do they reach you under Miranda Hall on LinkedIn, or what's the best way to find you so that you can assess what's going on in the business and help them just do things a little bit better?
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's definitely where the best access is. A sick note isn't just an HR box to check. It's a legal document and it's built on workplace trust. So if you're an employee, and I'm talking to employees now, protect your reputation and your job and your paycheck. Just keep it clean, official, and totally above board. And for the employers out there, the law says you can trust and you should trust, but it absolutely pays to verify. And with enough practice, you get really good at sniffing out a forgery.
Yeah. Trust is good, control is better. What's the message to team leaders when they're faced with this sort of situation? What are the top 3 things that they need to think about as they go through the troubleshooting process?
Right. I think the first thing is for them to be concerned about why they're seeing repeat absenteeism. And then to have that conversation with the employee. Look at the trends in the department as well. Is something happening in the department or in the organization? Obviously, your third one is to highlight this to human resources as soon as you possibly can, and then plot the way forward. Is it actually incapacity as well? That the individual you need to be concerned about because he really is or she really is ill, and how could the company support them?
Fantastic. Miranda, as always, a pleasure to chat to you and another interesting topic covered. So yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Thanks so much, Gerald. Go strong.
You too. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.